Okay, so this is a um, for Wednesday, May 29th. It's the YouTube thing. We're going to talk a bit about governance. That one of the things that I've noticed while talking to everyone in class is that, and it's typical of most people in most years that we do this, that there's a fuzzy relationship in thinking about governance. And so I want to review some of the ways that environmental management is structured with respect to our government. And I posted up a paper to read about building a conservation portfolio in the Southwest through government actions. And then we'll talk a bit about that and land easements on Wednesday. So watch for this. Here we go. So anyway, environmental law can be established and modified in each of the three branches of government. We'll talk about those in a minute, and at the local and national levels. And so what happens in California is that, and this is much like the federal government, is that we have a process for a bill becoming a law. And that is the bill can be introduced, and then there's a series of committee hearings, and then there's floor action. If it's passed, the bill is passed in one side of Congress or the other, the House or the Senate, then it has to go to the other side, to the other house, where there'll be committee hearings, and then bring that to a floor action. And each time there's committee hearings and a floor action, there can be amendments and changes to the bill. And so once there's a floor action in the other house, if it's had amendments, it can be changed and passes back to the original house, where they have to agree to those amendments. And if they agree to those amendments, then the bill goes to the governor. If it's passed without amendments, it goes straight to the governor. And if it's signed by the governor, it then becomes law, usually January 1st of the next year. This is an interesting week because it's the week where all these bills that have been kicking around in committee hearings in the state of California, they have to come to floor action, or they get killed and go back to ground zero. And so there's lots of legislative activity going on in Sacramento this particular week. So the idea is we want to, in order to figure out how we fix environmental problems, we have to know who has jurisdiction over which environmental problems. And so this is a primer to the institutions that are important to understand. So the first thing that you need to know is that there's a hierarchical order of jurisdiction with respect to environmental laws, and that is that the federal government has jurisdiction over what the Constitution says it does, and not things that it doesn't say it has jurisdiction over. So it has jurisdiction over interstate issues and issues of national security. And of course, these things are open to interpretation. And this is why we have political parties and, i.e., a civil war over what rights states have to pass particular laws. What is national interest versus state interests? And so we have, for example, in the Constitution, Article 1, the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and this guides interstate commerce, and this has passed down through to migratory bird treaties in thinking about how birds move back and forth between states, for example. All right, so then states have authority over everything which the Constitution does not say is under federal jurisdiction, but that there's also state constitutions, and they have jurisdiction over those things. Local governments control local issues not claimed under state jurisdiction. And so most land use planning activities are city or county issues. They're not state issues. They're not federal issues. We have an exception in California with the Coastal Commission, which has usurped the authority of local governments in the state interest of protecting our California coastline. But in most cases, land use decisions are local. That within the government, we have three branches. We have a legislative branch for the federal government. That's the House of Representatives and the Senate. We have an executive branch. That's the president and the federal agencies. And we'll talk a bit about those. And then the judicial branches, which have district and Supreme Court. So we have hierarchies of courts. So a bit about the legislative branch. This is Congress. They enact laws. These laws require a signature of the president or an override of a presidential veto. and that these laws are subject to challenge under the Constitution, which then the courts decide. So the courts are the arbiter of what's constitutional. And so when the federal government has overstepped its bounds, gone beyond the Constitution, the Supreme Court can tell the federal government that that law is unconstitutional. With respect to environmental laws, the Congress is not a scientific body, thus environmental laws are vague regarding the specifics of the application and tend to focus on an aspirational goal, like the Endangered Species Act provides for protection of species at risk of extinction. It says that we aspire to not cause the extinction of species, but it doesn't and provides guidelines for defining for characterizing species as at risk, but it doesn't define what at risk actually means. Similarly, the National Environmental Policy Act provides the aspiration that we have to inform ourselves of what kinds of things we're doing to the environment, not whether particular things are bad or not bad. Okay, the executive branch is then I'm going to go back for just a second and make a point on the legislative branch. Hang on just a second. Okay, so sorry, I stopped there for a second, just to finish a train of thought, that the legislative branch can then actually act in two different ways in terms of influencing environmental laws. One, they pass laws that the administrative branch then, executive branch then carries out. But they also pass budgets, and budgets are where these different agencies are funded. And so, for example, under the Endangered Species Act, the Congress can put a lot of money or a little money into the Endangered Species Act, and that will drive the difference in the capacity of the executive branch to do stuff under that particular law. Okay, so the administration is responsible for the application of the law. For example, the 2012 U.S. Forest Service Planning Rule is a rule that was developed within the Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Forest Service, and that it's sanctioned up to whoever is the line officer who has authority for that particular rule. This last week, the president defined a new rule with respect to the use of drones in warfare, for example, and a new definition of terrorism. Okay, so the administrators are presidents, governors, mayors, county commissioners, etc., and that the administration has the authority to protect national interests, including resources, by decree. So, for example, the 1904 Antiquities Act allowed Clinton to set aside 300,000 acres of sequoia habitat prior to his departure as president a number of years ago. However, things that can be done by an administration through presidential decree can also be undone, and so you see that happen periodically. The administration then has different ways of administering the environment, so that there are three basic types of agencies within the administration. There's the executive. These are cabinet level agencies. These are departments, and they're headed by secretaries. So they're appointed by the president with the consent of Congress. So we have the Department of Interior with the Secretary of Interior, Department of Agriculture with the Secretary of Agriculture, Department of Defense and Commerce, and all sorts of other things. We have independent agencies, and these are run by Board of Commissioners, and again appointed by the president, but they're supposed to be apolitical. So the Federal Trade Commission, for example, is one of these. And then there's a hybrid, some sort of combination of attributes of being independent or executive, and the Environmental Protection Agency is one of those. It has a director, but this director is not a cabinet position, but it is appointed by the president. So if we look at administrative agencies, an example, here's the EPA. It was begun in 1970. It's an agency with jurisdiction over laws like the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, but not physical resources. There's no land or water resource owned by the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, so it was created to administer the clean air legislation of the 1960s and the National Environmental Policy Act. It evaluates environmental impact statements and works on government actions, and it's charged with setting pollution standards. But a lot of it is a lot of their work is passed on down to state agencies, which have shadow organizations. So in California, we have we have state agencies that effectively do all of the work of the Environmental Protection Agency within the state of California. Things like our Air Resources Board. Okay, and then there are other agencies that own resources. So there's the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Forest Service. These all own and manage land, and so they manage different amounts of land, and they manage these lands for different purposes. Now, the green ones here are all within the Department of Interior, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service. The Department of Interior also includes the Bureau of Indian Affairs and things like this. And the Department of Agriculture then has the Forest Service. If we look at the Department of Interior, it was established in 1849 by combining the General Land Office. The General Land Office was set up to define what kind of, to survey what kind of land was in the United States, with the emphasis on giving that land to citizens to develop the country. It was also combined the Office of Indian Affairs and the Patent Office, Census Office, and a couple others. It now houses the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Reclamation, Bureau of Land Management, and U.S. Geological Service, Bureau of Mines. The Bureau of Reclamation is what is reclaiming land for agricultural purposes. So what does the Bureau of Reclamation do? They build dams and move water around. The Forest Service was created in 1905 when federal forest reserves were shifted out of Interior and into the Department of Agriculture. This is that battle between Gifford Pinchot, who wanted to conserve in order to maximize utility of forests, and John Muir, who was advocating the intrinsic value of forests. So some of these things across these departments share some common interests. So the Forest Service, which is in the Department of Agriculture, and the Bureau of Land Management, which is in the Department of Interior, share the attribute that the guiding directive for management is multiple use, sustained yield, and things like this. Okay, now the last thing is going on this YouTube is, well, who are they now? So these are the people who had these agencies at the present time. So Sally Jewell is the newest secretary. She's the former CEO of REI, and she heads the Department of Interior. Tom Vilsack was appointed the head of the USDA back in 2009, early in the Obama administration, still is the Department of Agriculture's head. Lisa Perez Jackson was the head of the EPA, also an early Obama appointee who still heads that department. And Rebecca Blank is the acting Secretary of Commerce. In other words, the Secretary of Commerce stepped down, and they've yet to appoint another one until someone has to be in charge. They usually take some long-term career employee for that agency and appoint them temporary secretaries until they get a new confirmation hearing, because the president has to appoint someone, has to then go through Congress, etc. Okay, so that's the legislative branch and the administrative branch. We aren't doing the judicial branch, but I'll try and talk a bit about that on Wednesday, and then we will then put this in the context of lands and how land protection has developed in the Western United States. All right, see you tomorrow.